Hi, I'm Jeff, lead pastor of Northview Community Church in Abbotsford, British Columbia. And this podcast is where I get a chance to interview people about things that I'm interested in and talk about whatever I want to talk about.
Hi, and welcome here. My name is Levi. I may not be a super familiar voice to a lot of you, but I'm the producer of the podcast, so I get to be Jeff's conversation partner in the little preamble bit we're going to do before our normal interview segment. That'll be few minutes of us talking about current events, if there's stuff that either of us has opinions about, which I would expect to happen every week, opinionating.
Yeah, because we have, it's not hard.
No, lots of stuff.
It's not hard to have opinions about many of these things, Levi.
That's true.
It's good to have you here.
It's good to be here. This is the second time that people will be hearing my voice. I was also, during my internship here, on a parenting podcast.
Really?
Yes. Speaking as a child of parents. So
yeah. You're an expert in that area.
Oh, yeah, big time baby. So
my experience with my parents. Okay, yeah.
It was all positive. My parents are excellent. We're going to get into a few topics around some stuff that's been happening lately. Jeff has assured us that he has opinions about these things. So we're gonna get started. The first thing, I'm not sure if you've heard, Dr. Seuss has been censored a little bit, but self-censored.
Yes.
The publishers have decided to no longer print, I believe, 6 of their titles.
Right, because they have little what they perceive to be racist pictures, but a bunch of other people don't perceive it to be racist pictures. What's weird to me about this whole thing is that they're censoring themselves. Mm-hmm. So I really don't get the big deal about this. If you want to censor yourself, don't you have the right to censor yourself? That's not censorship. I mean, isn't that just freedom? I thought that was freedom. So in other words, I don't think that I have to say everything that I think all the time. Or I might look back at some of the sermons I used to preach and say, ugh, that's not very good in light of new things that I know or believe. So I would get rid of those things. That's not like they weren't canceled. I'm canceling them. And listen, you might be frustrated with the world that forces or pushes the owners of the Dr. Seuss franchise to cancel stuff. That's a different question, though. But I don't understand. Seriously, it's become like a massive issue. Oh, save Dr. Seuss. It's just like
from Dr. Seuss.
I know. Yeah. Dr. Seuss. They can do what they want.
I think all those books skyrocketed to the top of Amazon's bestseller lists.
I bet they were worth like $6,000. It's probably what they did. This is a new Coke thing. You're too young to remember, but they came out with new Coke, and then they went back to Coke Classic, and I still think it was a ploy because everybody started buying Coke Classic after they brought Coke Classic back because they thought new Coke was trash. So it's a big ploy.
I had a prof in Bible college who thought that it was all a big Coke conspiracy theory, that they knew exactly what they were doing from the get-go.
Yeah, same thing with that moon landing. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
They didn't get into that much in Bible school for some reason. Don't know why. So another kind of thing that's happened lately in that realm of things being censored or canceled, there was a bit of a debate set up on a somewhat sensitive topic between two people, and there was some outrage that arose because the general public who saw these two people thought that one was far less qualified than the other to be speaking about this particular topic. And the organization organizing it got so much pressure to cancel this debate, this discussion, that they had to issue an apology for the pain that they caused people.
Was one of the debaters, though, had misrepresented their CV?
A little bit, yeah.
Is that right?
I think a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Because that's not a good thing.
No.
Right? I mean, I think people sometimes give that a pass and are like, yeah, no big deal. I mean, who hasn't said that they went to Harvard? And, well, a lot of people have said that. This is my thing, even back in the day with Christians and Ravi Zacharias. He like inflated his CV. And I hear this frequently from lots and lots of different leaders and political figures and others that the way that they describe their experience with a thing is not actually quite the experience they've had. They make it sound like they have had way more to do with that thing than others. And that, of course, that's just, it's sort of, they want to inflate your impression of them because they're people who went to these really important universities. But they didn't, right? And so in the end, it is a kind of like shading the truth, and it just drives me nuts, the shading of the truth, right? But you've done it, and I've done it. Everybody's done it at some point or another. Yeah, I've had a lot to do with Justin Bieber, right? And you saw him across a parking lot one time. Maybe. Yeah, the guy looked like him. At least his build was like it, and he had a hoodie on. So,
but he was driving like an old Camry,
right,
so like maybe
right.
not.
But if I were Justin Bieber and I wanted to trick people, I would be driving this 1996 Camry, right?
It's a good car.
Yeah. So I get it. And people end up exaggerating their stuff. But I do think it's interesting that they canceled stuff. Man, you can't do anything these days. You can't. Anytime you make any little error, though, you're done.
I'm expecting this podcast to get canceled at some point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
As soon as they put
maybe this week. This week. No, it's crazy. It's actually, cancel culture is nuts. I don't actually understand. Some people think it's not a thing. We're just holding people accountable. Right. Like puritanical New England held people accountable. Right? I mean, I was just telling you before we started here that there was a book that I had to read in high school called The Scarlet Letter, written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, a great American writer, and it was about a woman who broke the sexual mores of their Puritan community, and so they made her wear a scarlet A for adulteress all over the place, so everybody knew who she was. And the whole point, one of the big points in the book is, look at this, how bad puritanical New England was about people who just wanted to live their lives, and it's oppressive and blah blah blah. And I think about it now. Who are the Puritans now? Isn't it basically I don't even know what to call the folks, right? Some people call them woke secularists or whatever. Like, they have a certain set of rules that if you don't adhere to, then you will not be allowed to do things. And I'm like, that's a religion. That's a religion, which is weird because secularism is by definition non-religious. But what you've got is woke secularism that answers questions about the beginning of life and what happens at the end of life, the purpose of life. It answers all of the religious questions, and it even has its own priests now. And they're the ones who guard the edges, right? And they tend to be people who are employed at the New York Times or whatever. If they end up sicking someone on you because you didn't say the right thing, or maybe you said something 17 years ago that was a particular off, as if people can't somehow change their minds or grow, it's gotten really scary. And so the public square is like a landmine. It's a minefield. You just walk around the landmines constantly now. And anytime you want to put something out publicly, it's really, really difficult. And yes, of course, people shouldn't be speaking in ways that are harm people knowingly, right? I don't want to say anything that would harm anyone in any kind of racial way or in any kind of sexist way or anything. We Christian people, we love everybody. And we speak from our particular point of view, but at the same time, I just don't know where grace is anymore. And that is one of the chief reasons, in my opinion, why Christianity is way better than secularism. Because even though we've had these really dark moments in our past, right, like a Scarlet Letter or something like that, we mostly repudiate that now. Mm-hmm. We look at it and say, no, actually, people do make errors and they do fail. And the message of the gospel is that Jesus welcomes you home. Whereas if you're in the woke secularist, you're not coming home unless you do enough penance, and you never know if you've done enough penance. You don't know. If you're useful to them, then in the end you can do some penance and you'll get off. But until you're not useful anymore, like Andrew Cuomo is getting killed right now because of his lack of usefulness. So anyway, it's a very sad state of affairs, and it's really hard, in my opinion, about what's going to happen in the future. Because it gets dicier and dicier for people to say something publicly.
Yeah, it's just a new iteration of works-based salvation in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's impossible. Like every works-based system, it's impossible. You will eventually say something wrong. They will cannibalize themselves. Everybody does. And that's the way all fundamentalists have acted. Like even now, the people who have the highest sexual ethics in Christianity end up acting like, think about Ravi Zacharias, like he ends up acting like he did. And you're like, see, the very things that you said were true are now the things that are eating you. which is so sad.
We have just one more thing we're going to get into before we transition over to your interview. Potato Head, Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah, very important, the potato head.
Yeah. This is top-notch stuff here.
I've spent a lot of time in my life, as a young child, with the potato head. I did not know he was gendered, and there were no features of him that made me think ever about his gender or not gender. I guess the mustache, but it could be argued, Levi, that a mustache can happen on other, and females too. So
and vice versa. Not every
Right.
man has a mustache.
no, some of them, like you, I don't think you could grow a mustache at all.
I actively try not to, but it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've reached the point in our culture where Dr. Seuss and Potato Head are the biggest things that we want to fight about. How dare they change Potato Head? It's Mr. Potato Head.
And if you're on Twitter at all, that is what people have been
They'll
losing their minds
freak
about
out.
lately. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good fun.
So those are the kind of topics that you can expect when we have our little conversations before the interview, stuff that people have been active about online, current events, various things.
By the way, my opinions are just my opinions.
Yeah.
They're not the opinions of Northview Community Church or Levi.
That's true.
It's just my opinions. But I like to giggle at some things. Right.
That's our goal,
Yeah.
a little lightheartedness. We're going to move into now. Jeff sat down for an interview with our young adults pastor, Vinh, some stuff about his history, his testimony, his life in ministry. We think you'll be really edified by that conversation.
I'm sitting here with Vinh Doan. He is the young adults pastor at Northview Community Church. Hails from Australia, but also somewhere else prior to that.
Yeah,
Where?
Calgary, 7 years.
Calgary, Australia. They're the same thing, Vinh.
Absolutely not. I can
Vin-
prove it.
I'm going to tell you something just before we get going, and I want to hear your story. You got an amazing story, and interesting how the Lord has used you and saved you and done all sorts of stuff. So I want to get into that in a
Sure.
second. But before we do, your name, Vinh Doan,
Yeah.
is one of those names that you feel like you should be saying together all the time. Have you ever heard anybody say Dr. Henry? It's always Dr. Bonnie Henry. Dr.
That's-
Bonnie Henry.
Yeah,
You're,
it's true.
You're Vinh Doan.
It seems to be working.
Don't you think so? Vinh Doan.
I don't know. Like
People
I mean,
call you Vin, just Vin.
people have called me just Vin, or
No.
people have even asked questions of, is it short for something? No, it's
The
not.
rest of
It's
this
just
interview,
Vin.
I'm gonna say, so Vin Doan, what is? No, I'm kidding. I'm not
You go
kidding.
right ahead, man. Jeff Bucknam.
See, it's different though, right?
It is.
Yeah.
There's no ring to it.
No.
No.
Okay, Vin Doan. Vin,
Yes.
tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, a lot of people who are listening don't really know you. So, can you tell them a little bit about yourself, where you're from,
Yeah.
which they just found out, but like, how did you end up there? How did you end up in Calgary? You
Yeah.
have a wife and 2 children. How did that come to be? How did you meet her? That
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Australia. So
Where?
Sydney, to be exact. That's my hometown. And, after my parents did their thing to give birth to me, then that's where I landed, so to speak. And then, I was speaking at a conference. I got invited to a youth conference.
Was that right after your birth?
Soon after. And got invited to speak. And in Canada, in Edmonton to be exact, and Toronto. I was at a youth conference, spoke there, bumped into my future wife, Laura, and then sort of signed.
Was it love at first sight?
No, love is too strong of a word.
Okay,
I
but
was.
you
It was.
interested
I
first
was
then.
interested. I was attracted
Was
to my
she?
wife.
I
No.
was attracted to my wife.
She
well,
thought-
some people start with their, they're like, hey, we were friends for 20 years. And in fact, I think one of our pastors recently said in front of some people that his wife wasn't marrying material at the beginning. It's like, oh, that's...
My story is just as romantic as that. Like, she was not interested. She thought I had wife and kids back home in Australia. So she was like avoiding me. She was like, that's a married man. I don't want anything to do with him. So I pursued her, asked her dad and all those things. And so, look, man, when we were deciding where to sort of move, we sat down, we had a conversation on Skype and just like, hey, where should we go? In Australia, my ministry is established. I'm doing really well. And she was potentially going to come over to Australia, and I sat down with my dad. I was like, Dad, what do you think? And it took a 30-second conversation. He goes, you pack up your bags and you go. That was the end of it. So, okay. Didn't look at the fine print, and about all that snow. Oh, man.
That would have been weird for you. Sydney is not known for its snow. You should show up in Calgary.
Yeah, but at least it's known for criminals, so convicts,
Yeah.
at least that. But yeah, I still remember. Like, I'm not good with dates. I recently, just this week, Jeff, I forgot my wedding anniversary.
Ooh.
Yep. So
How did that
it's
go?
out there.
Did
yeah.
your wife was very very happy about that?
She did the emoticon of the hand slap to the face, to the forehead. Like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with you? But I remember the date when I landed, because I left Australia. January 6th, 2013. It was the summer, middle of summer, 35 degrees. I land in Calgary, minus 20 without wind chill. That was something.
Bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah, with my Australian winter jacket,
Yeah, I bet, which is
paper
like a
thin.
shell. Yeah. Well, that's good. You were in Calgary for 7 years, and then you moved here just this last year a little bit. You've actually not done ministry here at Northview without COVID.
Correct.
Wow, you're like our COVID pastor.
Yeah, man, I'm almost like a. Yeah.
Did you come after COVID started or just before?
After.
Okay, because I was going to blame COVID on you for a minute there. So basically, we've experienced all that we've experienced as soon as you got here.
So be it. I'll take it on the chin. I'll fight anybody about it. Come on.
There you go. So Vin, you have an interesting story about how you came to faith in Christ. I want to hear it, but before we do that, I want to ask you your best joke about an Australian. Come on, Australia. There's a lot of good Australian jokes.
There are. It's been a long time. But I mean, the only one I can think of is when the joke goes like when you apply for an Australian visa to come visit the country, the border security will ask, "Oh, don't you have your criminal record?" Yeah, so because if you don't know, that's part of our history.
Well, yeah, it is part of the Australian history.
Yeah.
It was a colony
Correct.
of criminals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we love it. Like as Australians, love to celebrate that.
Do
I
they?
love it. I don't know why. It's a thing.
Okay, so I have. Is it true that if you call somebody a Canadian in Australia, that's like a put down?
According to you, yes, maybe.
No, I've heard this before.
I've never heard it, but
a bunch of Australians will be like, "Oh, you're such a Canadian," and that's a knock on them.
Australians love to knock every other country.
So you believe the possibility of it?
Okay, okay, people, listen. This is the way I'll frame it, Jeff. The only time Canada came onto my radar, even before my wife, was there was a picture after the Canucks lost that Game 7, and it was a picture of a couple making out on the ground. I don't know if you remember that photo.
Mm-hmm.
There was two young adults making out. The only reason why that photo reached Australia because one of the people making out was Australian. And we're like, yeah, that makes sense. There's riot police all around you. They're making out. But it was funny for us as Australians that you would riot over a game.
Yeah.
And Australians love sport. You know this, Jeff.
Yeah.
We love sports. We've never rioted over it. We'll kill people, but we won't riot.
No, that's right. But you guys all have TVs and stuff, whereas here sometimes you need to have a new TV.
Yeah.
So you just wait for the next Canucks loss, and away you go.
I'm waiting.
You don't need to wait very long, Vin, for that one. There's a ton of Australians in Whistler. Why are they all there?
They love the snow, man. They love the snow. We don't get much of it in Australia, and so that's where they go.
Okay.
So, and I've never been. So
It's a run by Australians, basically.
I'm not even surprised. Come
Yeah.
on, there will be like drunkenness and debauchery. Come on, that's what Australians do.
Good. Right. So here's the thing. You're a little bit surprised that you're a Christian.
Absolutely,
So why?
not even a little bit.
What's your story? Why are you a little bit surprised that you're a Christian? What happened?
Yeah, long story short, I was in a gang for like over 10 years. That's partly because of my, because I was dealing and selling like heroin in large quantities, and so I ended up in prison. So that was my life.
How old were you when you got involved in the gang, and how did that actually come about?
So probably about age of 13 when I first started. They were always there, even when at the age of 12. Part of it was getting bullied at school. I don't think that helped me either. I think that just sort of got me plugged into that group. That sense of belonging. Because if I was getting rejected at school and I didn't have any sense of, even though my parents are Christians, lovely, amazing Christians, church didn't feel like a place of belonging either. So I had to find it in the best way possible. And the gang thing fit perfectly because everyone in that group had strange names like me. It wasn't that typical Aussie, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. And so finding kids with the same look as me, black hair, Asian looking, and then same strange names. We didn't have to explain anything. Because I remember going to school, bringing my little lunchbox, and then mum and dad would serve me what I ate at home. It wasn't a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It would have been rice and some dead animal we found on the road. Right? That's what we ate. And so, but I would have to explain that. Like, what's that smell? What do you know? Like, so it just made me feel so, in a sense, alone. So the group was perfect. Because the second part to that was with the bullying. It gave me protection. Now no one was gonna mess with me anymore. Yeah.
So, when you first started in the gang, you're obviously from a Christian background, a Christian home. I'm assuming your family was. Did they know? Was it something kind of public, or was this one of those things that you sort of did behind the scenes? Did you still go to church and stuff?
In the beginning, it was private. When I say the beginning, probably the first year. And then after the year, probably when I was 14, it was like full-blown public. When I mean full-blown, and this is sort of my personality as well, I remember when my parents would make me go to church even at 14, I was smoking my cigarettes right at the front entrance of the church so everyone would see. Because there was no once you had been in that gang for now about a year, that very mentality that you're in the group, you sort of live and die in it. Like there was nothing else. I already got the tattoo by that time, so it was full blown. Like you're not a gangster on the weekend and the 5 days you're a good Christian boy. It's like, hey, 7 days, are you in? You're out. I'm in. So even at church, I'm in to represent the group as well.
Wow. Did you have any friends who were in the gang who were also involved in church, or was that
no?
Like you were the only kid kind of from that background?
Yeah,
what did your parents think?
Dad was, I think, he's a typical, maybe Asian father, sort of kept it to himself, but you could sort of see the disappointment where mum was the opposite, trying to, growing up in Vietnam, being refugees, escaping from Vietnam during the Vietnam War, they didn't have to do with whether it was bullying or racism or anything like that. So mum just didn't know what to do or say. Like she would say typical stuff like ignore it and it'll go away, or the way to love me back was to maybe cook my favorite meal, but there were no words. It's just like, I don't know what to do but to serve my child, just to let him know I love him and hug him and kiss him and all those things.
Was there a lot of racial animus in Australia at that time toward Asian kids?
Yeah, from the 70s to the mid 80s, yeah, there was a lot. I think, part of it was the political landscape of Australia at the time too, which was, long story short, like the Australian population didn't want to take that many immigrants from Vietnam over, but the Prime Minister at the time pulled the trigger and said, we have to take them in. And so, okay, fine, if you're going to take them in, then you have to put them in these sort of neighborhoods. So, for example, it'll be like they can't live with us in Vancouver, so send them to Abbotsford or Chilliwack or Hope. And so there were these hubs, of these pockets of communities where immigrants of Greeks, Italians, Vietnamese, Chinese, Lebanese and all these things.
Right. And were there, it seems to me that gangs form out of a lot of that kind of animus.
Yep.
And so as a result, yours did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was just out of, I think at first it wasn't, it was intentional in the sense of, everyone would say that their hands were forced because they were getting picked on. The only way to protect yourself is to then group together.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were in it for 10 years.
Yep.
Did you spend the first few years, did you know that you were getting into something that was going to involve you like selling drugs a lot of places? Or was it sort of like, hey, I'm here with the group, kind of like a fraternity type thing?
Yeah, I would say more of the latter. It was going to be a fraternity, and you just sort of, I would never have thought I was going to be dealing drugs and dealing with all that type of money and gang violence. I wasn't in it for that at first. You know, you're in it because you want that brotherhood, you want a group. But then, you know, then it became about survival as well. And what I mean by survival was a lot of the kids in that group, their parents were like quite poor. I wasn't. I was more fortunate than them, but they definitely weren't. So, you know, to go around stealing cars and breaking into sheds and stealing power tools because that's worth money and selling it in the black market, that was a way to survive. But then once drugs came into it, then that's where we knew where the real money was.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got involved in dealing it.
Yeah.
So give me a did you have certain people who would buy from you? Just go on the street somewhere, or what did you do?
So there's levels. So for instance, when I first started selling heroin at about 15, I was what we would have called a puppet. I didn't know that I was called that behind the back room until I got to that level. But the puppet is the most dangerous. That's the most dangerous one out of the grouping because you're out on the street. You're completely exposed. You have the heroin on you constantly 24/7, whether it be in your mouth, in your pocket, in your shoe, or hidden somewhere. But you're the puppet. And you might make, you know, as a kid at about 15 years old, you know, making a few $100s, like maybe up to $500 a day, like as in profit that I get to spend.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money for a kid.
That age.
And so as you get up, you know, when you get up higher within the rankings, you make more money, but your job is safer, but you're dealing with a lot more. So the risk is higher, especially let's say if it's getting transported into the country, you know, that's if you get caught for that, then you're done for life.
And you did get caught.
I did.
How did they catch you?
Through a lot of undercover. And so I got caught multiple times. And it's funny because it's like I always thought I would outsmart them because I know more. I learned more. And so I know what to detect and look for. And somehow, look, they're just as good.
So in the end, you end up going to jail. You had a sentence that lasted how long? How long was your sentence?
Originally, it was a few years, and it got reduced partly because of a technicality, which I would say is from the providence of God. Because to me, looking back, it wasn't. I mean, they had everything, but I think it was the wording or how they found the evidence that the judge says no, we're gonna have to reduce it.
So, Vin, when did you come back to faith in Christ?
I don't know if it came back, you know, maybe the right terminology. Maybe, but
Well, tell me what the right terminology is then.
look, man, the way I viewed my life is true. Like God Himself. I don't know if I came back. I don't think I was ever there to come back to. And I remember I was in California, in Orange County to be exact. I had cleaned up, like as in I was off drugs, life was good, in the sense of I was just out of the group. Most of my group had been dead, as in murdered because of just internal gang violence. I knew I needed to restart, refresh, and then went to California, went to Orange County, cleaned up, and then in the back of my mind, I was like, I'll go back to the life. Once everything settles down in Australia, I'll go back, make the money. Just like, because most criminals, they don't know what else to do but the very thing that they left. That's the only way I was going to make money and whatever it was. My aunt eventually asked me to go to a church service with her. I went to a church service. My heart was still really hard. Was not searching for God at all. I can remember that very clearly. There was a communion. It was during communion. And they were preparing communion. I decided I was going to take it for whatever reason. Partly because I wanted to honor my father. And so I took communion, took the bread, ate it. No issue. When I took the cup, I drank it and I blacked out and I fell. Like I sort of fell on my knees to the floor. That was for about 3 seconds. Got back up. I'm like, whoa, that was weird. I went back home and then had this nagging thing that I think something happened. I don't know what it is. Something must happen. And so I called my dad. He was the only one I thought could potentially answer me. And he gave me, you know, these scenarios. Do you think it's this? Do you think it's that? I was like, no. He goes, okay, Vin, Well, we know that the cup that you drank represents the blood of Jesus. Do you think that as you drank it, that that blood that represents Jesus, like sort of collided with every sort of evil spiritual force within you and sin and whatever demonic presence that was in you? And you have to understand, my dad is almost fundamental, like conservative, like suit tie, type of Christian. And for him to say that, and when he said that, and he goes, do you think when those two words collided and the blood itself was washing away, or that cup was washing away, that it brought you to your knees before the Lord? And as soon as he said that, I was like, that's it. That's what happened. I don't know how, but that's what happened. And so something like that has never happened to me again. Yeah. So that's my,
You are a story about how God was kind of a Damascus Road situation. Like you weren't looking for it, and all of a sudden, God.
No.
Yeah.
And I think by God's grace, I think he realized how deep and dark I was in that world, or in that sin, that it took a road to Damascus moment to waken me up. It couldn't be something, I don't know if it would have been a great talk by Dr. Jeff Bucknam or anything. It maybe could, or by reading scripture, or whatever it was, but God chose that very way to really waken my senses, so to speak.
And so now you're here. You're a pastor.
Yeah.
That was unforeseen, I'm assuming.
Yes. Oh, boy. Yes, very much so.
I mean, as shocking as telling your 10-year-old self that you would be involved in gang violence and in drug selling, I imagine telling your gang violent and drug selling self that you're going to be a pastor in a number of years would have been just as shocking.
I would have told myself, just stay in prison, man. It'd be easier.
So, my question, I think, is that I've heard your story before, but I've often wondered what. So here you sit now, and you have this history. I'm just wondering how you deal with your past manner of life. Like what kinds of emotions come up when you tell that story?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I live in this really weird tension that I don't mind talking about it sort of one-on-one. If people came up to me privately and asked, I'm very cautious about how I use it on stage. Like even at Northview, I think my very first sermon at Northview, I mentioned it, and I've never mentioned it ever again. Like I'm very conscious about not using God's time or God's pulpit to promote me or my story, unless it's like a perfect illustration. But if I can, I won't. I avoid it as much as possible because I just want to honor God himself and his word and what we're preaching, what I'm drawing people to. Because I've seen in the past where my story has, by God's grace, he will allow my story to outdo his. He will allow it. And I used it and I abused it until my professor of preaching came up to me one day and said, "Hey, Vin, if I took away your story, what story would you have?" And I said, "I would have the story of Jesus." And he goes, "Tell that one." And that broke me. And maybe I swung really hard with the pendulum, swing went to the other side. And so I try to be very cautious, but the weight of it is always there. Like every time I apply for some type of visa, my visa here, I have to go through that criminal record check. When the US is still really hard for me to get into. It's been 20 years since I was in Seattle.
It's hard for everybody to get into these days.
Very true. But that component will never leave. And just like, for those who don't know, I have 2 young daughters who love Disney. I have to contemplate the idea of I might not be able to take them to Disney. I have to deal with that. And I have to explain to my children. And Laura and I have even spoken about, Laura, maybe you have to take them because I can't get in. So I'm very aware, and I'm very aware of how it can be used and not be used and all those things.
So if you met somebody who's got kids, and they are, they've grown up in a Christian home and they're in their teenage years now and they're walking a path that looks familiar to what you just described. Not maybe the whole, they're not selling drugs yet, but they are walking in a direction that they're scared. How would you counsel them? Like what would you tell them to do, not do? How should they pray? Good questions.
A lot of it will be also dependent. One of the things I'll try to do is figure out what's happening even in the family dynamics. Like, these kids don't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I just want to be on drugs, or, oh man, I just want to be in a gang and go into prison. Whatever impact that has happened, whether it be at home or at school or whatever it is. So I'm trying to find out those things. One of the questions I'll even ask parents is whether it be surroundings. So a lot of drug addicts, a lot of them have to leave the areas that they live in, because anything familiar will sort of trigger them. So it's like, some of the hard advice I've had to give parents is, guess what? I hate to say it, you're going to have to pack up and move your entire family across the country if you want this child to be saved. And some families are not willing to do that. So it'll be that. There's a lot of conversations with the child themselves and figuring out even their personalities and characteristics I have to work through. Because for me, my danger is I just want to shout at everyone all the time. But there's been some guys who have been in it, they just need that gentle, you know what I mean? That gentle, tender whisper from a mother, like my mum, who waited for me every night to come home. When my dad was a bit more distant, mum was real close to me. So I think it's dependent on a lot of things, but to ask those good questions.
Do you look back at that now, your mom's behavior now, and think that it was slowly having a part to play, or was it kind of meh? Like, would you tell somebody to do that? Would not wait up on every night and stuff, because that's the challenge people have. Is they're like, well, if my friend's going down the path, like, how I want to encourage them to follow Christ, but I don't know how.
Yeah.
Should I be heavy-handed? Do I be gentle? What do I do?
I think I got the best of both worlds, and what I mean by that is, Dad was, not overly hard-hitting, but he gave me the truth. Like, why are you behaving like this? You wouldn't behave like this in public with the police around, because they'll arrest you, but you're willing to do it at home. Whatever it was, I was like smashing windows, and because I was so angry or whatever it was. He goes, you would never do this in public, but yet you would do it at home. So giving me that space to go, think through some things. But Mum, on the other hand, never said a word, but she told me, and I believe her, that she left the light on, because I wouldn't be home for weeks, years, but she left the light on at the front of our house every night for all those years. Every single night, the light was on to signal to me, you can always come home. Always. So I think, every child, every family, everybody gets to that end of the road moment. And when they get to the end of the road, the question then is, do they know where to go? Okay, they go to social services. They know they can go to government agencies, whatever, but do they know they can come home? Where for my mum, she wanted to send that message to me very clearly. Yeah, and it did go through. I always knew I could come back home.
Yeah, that's good. I find it interesting that earlier you said that my language was not the right language to use about you actually coming back to faith, and you pointed out that no, it's actually, I don't know if I was part of faith. I think this is a challenge for some parents. Is that their kids, they think that because their kids went to Sunday school or whatever, that their kids are somehow, believers. But their lives are not showing it at the time. And so in some ways, I sometimes feel like it would help if they looked at their children and realized, actually, my child is not actually, I don't know if they're a Christian. Yeah. Like, I don't know what to do with maybe little professions they made when they were young. I don't know what to do with all of those, but right now they're not actually, I don't know if they're a believer. So in the end, I think it's helpful to think, how would I treat somebody who's not a Christian? What kind of consideration and care would I show somebody who's not a believer? Yeah.
No, I agree. And that should, if we get to that place for a lot of our parents, I think that should even potentially change a lot of our prayer life as well. If we're reading and seeing our children for the way they actually really are, I don't think my parents had it was very clear to them that their child was unsaved. Though he had been to Sunday school, though he had been to church, though he was, all these things. No, it was very adamant.
So I'm changing the subject a little bit.
Yeah.
You've been involved in church for quite a while now.
Yeah.
In Australia and here in Canada. Are they similar? Like, what's going on with the church in Australia? How would you phrase it? Because everybody here, I think all they ever hear is, I guess Hillsong or C3 maybe, or.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think, I get that, but in the Australian scene, especially in Sydney, Australia, we get the Hillsong thing is very polarizing, but the truth is, according to stats in Australia, as in like church stats, Hillsong is maybe in attendance wise across the country is probably at like third or fourth to fifth. But the churches or the denominations that have the most would probably be the Anglicans, right? The Church of England, they're like astronomically like amazing.
A little bit different than here. The
Very
Anglican
different.
Church,
Unlike the
there.
Episcopalians over here.
Right.
So unlike them at all. But, the difference is Australians, like, one of the things you'll find out is, because we wear a heart on our sleeve and all these things, one of the things is, even in the church world, it's polarizing. And you almost have to choose a side. Maybe Australians won't like to hear this, but it's true in the sense that in the Christian world, it's like you're either on the Hillsong side or you're on the other side, like the Reform side.
Yeah.
You pick.
So the Anglican, there's some people here when they hear Anglican, they're like, oh, that's kind of a mainline church. And in Australia, it's a very evangelical denomination there, and very like gospel focused.
Yeah.
City Anglican diocese, great.
Yep.
Do some really great work.
Yep.
Is the church in Alberta doing well?
That's a good question. I think, it's even that's the question I have for Abbotsford as well. It's that question, even though there's a lot of buildings around, just like Alberta, just like Calgary and Edmonton, my reading of the situation is a lot of nominal Christians. That's my personal call on that. And, I think the time is, might be coming when, we're going to see the church for what it really is. But, that's the similarities I'm finding about Alberta and Abbotsford. That a lot of nominal Christians who feel safe in their beautiful, huge buildings and, but lifestyle outside, and that's where maybe my gang mentality comes in. When Christ sort of called and saved me, are you in? Oh, okay, I'm in. That's 7 days a week, 24/7. I'm in. And I think that's part of my even concern as a pastor as well. Are you in or are you out? You just choose.
Yeah, and it is a challenge here in Abbotsford or any town that has a number of churches, and it's very easy for people to go, and or at least where the church or Christianity is not looked down upon quite as strongly as in other places. If you live in downtown Vancouver, there's a lot of the people who are on the streets who are not going to, they're not going to think really highly of Christianity.
Right.
So if you're going to be a Christian, you kind of have to, it's worth it. Right. I have a ton of other things. I want you to ask me a question that you have, except I asked you if you would have one question prepared to ask me.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's mulling in your head.
Yeah.
I want you to also tell me what is the biggest problem that young adults face right now. People have millennials who work for them, right? And Gen Z who work for them, and they're pulling their hair out because they're like, "What is wrong with these people? Help these people. What is? How can you help somebody who employs them? And what is the challenge?" Yeah.
Great question. I think some of the books I'm reading, especially in regards to Gen Z or iGen, that the terminology I might use is that a lot of them now are less risk takers. And I think there's a danger for our young adults. They're less risk takers on every level. And what I mean is, Jeff, is like, I'll ask the girl out when I know for sure she's going to say yes. I'll ask her to marry me when I know for sure she's going to say yes. It's just all these things that it has to be a guarantee. Then I'll do it. Then I'll take that risk. I think that's been a danger, partly because of the stats say that about 2007, when this really has become an epidemic, which is because of the iPhone and social media, the components of Instagram and Facebook. Because once these millennials and then iGeners put themselves out there, the funny thing is when they put themselves out there and got the likes, got the loves, at the same time they got criticized so hard. You look fat in that. You look ugly. What's wrong with your ears? What's like all these things? And now they've withdrawn. They're scared to put themselves out there. Or they have an opinion on Twitter and you get destroyed.
Yeah.
So the idea of risk taking is a big thing, which I think has impacted the Christian world as well. Well, if I can't be a risk taker in just the clothes that I wear publicly, there's no way I'm going to take a risk for who Christ is and what he represents in this world.
Right.
That's my big concern, that has impacted not just these big beliefs that we have about who Christ is and how amazing, but yet these little intricate details of our lives.
The ease of feedback is crazy. It is. I mean, if you grew up in a social media world, the possibility that you will have an opinion or believe something that you'll get pushed back at you or they'll totally disagree with is really, really high. And so in the end, it does end up conditioning you into being like, oh, I don't know if I want to get involved.
Yep.
You know,
that's right.
I might have an opinion. I might actually want to make a difference, but I don't know if I want to get involved because there will be somebody out there who critiques. There's going to be some sort of troll out there who has a go at me.
Yeah. But the way it impacts some of the most fundamental things about being Christians, let's say, like, for instance, young adults and even baptism, the question they're asking is, and it's a huge concern for me, is they're asking about what do they lose? What do I lose if I profess Christ or if I get baptized? They're not asking the questions of what do I gain? They don't ask that question. And that deeply concerns me. They're not asking the right question.
Yeah. Say, I asked you that. You're a young adults pastor here, which, by the way, I thank God for. I'm super happy that you are here, and it's been a pleasure having you. What is your question for me? You have to have a question.
Do you want a serious one, or
I couldn't care less what your question is. You get one question. Here it is.
What's a budgie smuggler? Just answer it, Jeff.
No, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to answer that question.
People are going to start searching.
Shame on you. Shame on you, Vin. Yeah, okay.
That's it.
That's your question. No comment is my answer to that question. Okay, we're going to finish this with a lightning round.
Sure.
Okay? I am going to ask you questions. Listen, you need to answer these questions very quickly.
All right.
Don't sit and think about them forever.
All right.
All right, here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, off we go. Your favorite Hillsong song?
Oh, Oceans. I take that back.
Okay,
sort of.
No, that's what you answered. Oceans.
The Creed. Go back to the Creed.
Who's your favorite cricketer?
Shane Warne.
Shane Warne. Yeah, spin bowler.
Yeah.
If you played cricket, what position would you play?
Keeper.
Keeper. It's the wicket
keeper.
It's the guy who kind of like a catcher, but he's got.
But he's short.
Yeah,
so he's perfect.
What is the worst spider in Australia?
I have no idea.
Redback. Have you ever seen a nasty, huge spider in Australia?
Big one? Yeah, I've had one crawl up my back, and I didn't even know it.
Oh, my word. That's ridiculous.
It was bad.
Where's snake in Australia?
I've never seen a snake besides in a zoo.
What?
Yeah, man.
Oh, that's ridiculous. How many... Are you a criminal?
Yes.
Okay, so criminal from criminal land. Is that basically the case?
That's
How
correct.
many of your friends are criminals?
I would say nearly all of them.
Okay, C. Yep. Best rugby team in the world.
Oh, come on, man. The Wallabies.
The All the Blacks. Right, you failed on several of those. Vin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You are a star, and God bless you in the ministry you've done. I'm super thankful that the Lord grabbed you by the scruff of the neck and dragged you into his kingdom, and we are the beneficiaries of that. Those of you who don't know Vin, you can see him. He's very easy to see or hear. There's not that many Aussies around. There's a few.
Go to Whistler, find out.
That's exactly. You'll find him in Whistler with all his kin. Great.
Criminals.
Thanks a lot. Hey, for everybody else, till next time. Thanks for listening to Conversations with Jeff. Make sure you subscribe to catch up on all upcoming episodes. So until next time, love God, do what you want, and don't be stupid.